Tonight, the Mothers of the Movement organization is going to have a number of women speaking at the convention. These are 7 mothers of children who are killed in tragic circumstances, in some cases grown men, by law enforcement. You have the mothers of Trayvon Martin, you've got Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Michael Brown. And most people hearing that and seeing that on day 2 of the convention, they're going to have 7 spots, see that as a recognition of the loss of these mothers, other mothers in the movement, others like them who aren't in the movement. Others, though, see it as a bad thing. They see it as endorsing criminality and things like that. One person who sees it that way is Fox News contributor David Clark, J.R. Jackson's favorite sheriff. So we're going to go to that video now.
Donald Trump is the law and order candidate. And this DNC seems to be about embracing criminality and criminal behavior, trying to mainstream criminal behavior, hold these individuals up as if they're martyrs and symbols of the new civil rights movement.
Let's just frame that for the viewers so they know what you're talking about. So tomorrow night on stage here, the mother of Michael Brown, the 18-year-old who was killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri, among other mothers of African-American men who were killed at the hands of police officers, will take to the stage. Michael Brown's mother is the most controversial, however, because her son was the aggressor against a police officer. And
the thing is, look, moms are going to do what moms do. Moms love their kids no matter what. We all get that. But here's the question I have, Megan, and I keep asking. Where are the dads? When there are no fathers around to shape the behavior of young boys growing up, they grow up to be unmanageable misfits that the police then have to deal with aggressively.
So he mocks them as not being martyrs when clearly, look, you're going to try to pick apart the cases, but like Eric Garner, he's a fucking martyr. There's other martyrs. Martyrs not represented by the movement today on stage. People who were killed, there was no rational justification for those people being killed. They are martyrs.
How do they keep insulting the mothers of people that were shot and killed by police, and in the case of Trayvon Martin, by a crazed lunatic in the neighborhood when they haven't done anything wrong? In the case of Eric Garner, he made the terrible, terrible decision of trying to break up a fight, and that led to cops coming in and putting him in a chokehold and killing him. The only crime that, they could point to was him selling loose cigarettes. Really?
At a different time, not even at that time.
Right. And by the way, Trayvon Martin, you want to know where Trayvon Martin's dad was? He was in the house watching the basketball game with Trayvon Martin before Trayvon Martin went to the convenience store to get Skittles and iced tea. That's where his father was, right? Yeah. Perpetuating this notion that, these terrible, criminals, and they all deserve to die. I mean, it's so incredibly disrespectful. It's gut-wrenching. And just thinking about what the families of the victims go through day in, day out because of this narrative is sickening to me.
Yeah.
So Sheriff David Clark is a useful idiot. And so he'll be greatly outraged by that because, what? I have all these silly little buttons on my jacket, and so I did it by beating up other people and being an authority. So I don't know what you mean, but hey, by the way, if you play like Pokemon, you also get little buttons to put on your jackets. So, okay. Oh, but I risked my life. Not really, because you tell all your officers to shoot at first sight. So you didn't really take much of a risk. I'm talking about David Clark as specific. There are other great commanding officers that run police departments throughout the country that we've applauded, like San Antonio, who actually care about their citizens and make sure that people are not unjustly shot. So when he says, where are the fathers? Well, that's a right-wing talking point meant to smear all African Americans. Oh, where are the fathers? Now, they never say it about white people, so I'll say it. How about Bill O'Reilly? It says in his divorce proceedings that the kids were like, we don't know where our dad is. He's never here. We really, really want to stay with our mom because our dad's basically an absentee father. Where are the fathers, Fox News Channel?
What about Donald Trump? Okay, well, by the way, I don't care about this. I don't judge people for living their lives in this kind of way, right? But if we're going to have this conversation, what about Donald Trump, who has 5 kids from 3 different mothers, wasn't really involved in Tiffany's life very much, right? There are reports and stories about that. So you want to talk about where are the fathers? I mean, just using a blanket statement about the black community and making it seem like, all of these kids and all these people were troubled and they deserve to get shot and killed by cops just disgusts me.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he can't have any empathy. So, for example, if you were to say something I don't agree with, but that would be more defensible, say, hey, you know what? Look, Trayvon Martin was killed when he was unarmed. Eric Garner clearly at the time wasn't even doing anything wrong. Philando Castile had a weapon on him, but he had a license for that gun. He did all the right things by telling the officer about it. So if I'm playing a reasonable David Clark here, so I get why they want to, point that out, but they shouldn't include Michael Brown in that list because in David Clark's mind, he was the aggressor. If he made that point, nobody's going to flip out. We're going to disagree, but it's okay. That's his opinion. This is our opinion. But when he throws in all the people who are clearly innocent or shot in the back like Laquan McDonald 16 times, Tamir Rice shot in 2 seconds, 12-year-old with a toy gun. When you lump everyone together, well, then you're being a useful idiot because you are putting a black face on what right-wing racists want to say, which is, they're all guilty, aren't they? The Democrats are celebrating criminality.
Yeah.
That's their get out the vote, movement right there. This is what they want to do to get their white men out. I mean, they've already sold themselves out. So they have to continue with this narrative. And the other part of it is that there's some criticism, John, of this because Democrats were critical after the Republican convention of all these mothers that came out talking about their dead kids at the hands of illegal immigrants and soldiers and whatnot. But that was blaming. That was sitting there blaming Democrats for the death. This is not blaming. This is saying there's a problem and we have a plan to fix it. The Republicans came out and they said, this is their fault. And that's a totally different kind of politics. So they aren't the same thing. So when Republicans are saying, oh, but Democrats were all upset about what we did last week, they should have been upset. They were standing on coffins as soapboxes. That's what they were doing. And that's not what's happening here.